We are live, folks. Welcome in. It's the Monday night Beyond Books in partnership with NLP Liverpool weekly book chat or words and music, as it might be sometimes. Let's have a quick hello. Who's joined us already? Hello, Karen.
Hello, uh,
Karen,
I'm Karen. I'm from Sheffield, and
you're from Sheffield, and are you, from what I recall, you've told me this before, a member of the Romantic Novelists
I'm a
Association?
member of the New Writers Scheme in the Romantic Novelists Association. So I'm
So
writing
dare
my
we ask?
first novel.
Dare we ask how romantic is novelism at the moment? In well, we're in February now, aren't we?
I think it's very
It gets
romantic.
more
Yeah,
romantic in
yeah,
February, doesn't it?
yeah.
So is this what you'd aim for as a writer um, of the genre that you've chosen? Would you be thinking, I want my book out for Valentine's Day next year? Is that the big
uh,
aim?
I, mine's a saga, so it's a bit more gritty than
Yeah, but
it's not
yeah,
all
but you've told me a
romance.
bit about it because
Yeah,
we chat about, I chat to you and other writers just as friends, don't I? And
yeah,
you've definitely you're pushing the love interest as a core part.
yeah. It is a core part of it, but
Yeah,
it's got grittier parts, and
yeah.
it's got the
And
First World War and everything
I
in
was
it.
saying
So
to just before we went live, we were chatting amongst ourselves, and I was saying, I'm sure you told me the story that you spent all of November pretty much writing, and then got to the end of November and decided that you didn't technically quite like what you'd
that's
written
right.
and
Yeah, I wrote
almost
about
started again.
27,000 words, and then put
How
in the
many,
book.
Karen?
27,000.
You got through 27,000 words and put them all to one side.
Yeah, and started again.
So the new again has got to be so much better. That's got to be the way it goes, isn't
Yeah, I hope
it?
so.
We hope, we hope. And Julie Cunningham from the very NLP Liverpool. Hello.
Yes. Good evening.
So, and obviously, you deal with the power of words inside the mind in a way, I suppose. I mean, have you had a busy week? I mean, what's been going on the work front or the workshop front?
Well, it is only Monday.
Oh God, is
Um,
it?
it is only Monday.
And it's the first of the month. It's totally throws you, doesn't it?
We ran a workshop last week, and it's been so busy that the book that I ordered from you, a new book by Ethan Cross called Chatter, which is
Oh,
all about the voice inside your head and
yeah.
what it does for you, and how you can listen to it and how you can override it. Um, was one of those books that you listen about. How did I hear it? I was listening to the
I was
radio,
going to
and
say it
it's one of
sounds
those
like a radio
books.
book, doesn't it? Yeah.
Sometimes you listen to a radio program, and somebody starts talking about a book, and before the program's even finished, you've got to have the book.
Yeah.
Um, so we have the book, and unfortunately,
You've
it's
not read it
still
yet.
not even opened. So yes, that's
It,
that's my next challenge, is to get the book opened and the first chapter read. I thought to myself today, I must get the first chapter read so I can at least say something about it today. But too busy. I decided that a walk was more important.
yeah, but we can always come back. I mean, anyone's welcome if they do decide to come inside the Zoom and join us to tell us a bit about a book that they either have read or are going to read. I mean, once a month we're going to have a full, proper guest author, is what we've decided, isn't it? And I'm really pleased to announce that our first, what you might call proper international stroke nationally published author, who will be our primary guest on the first, I think it is the 1st of March, the first Monday in March, is a wonderful writer. She lives on the Wirral actually, but she's called Margaret Murphy, and she's also written in partnership with a police forensics expert. So they wrote in a partnership as a name A.D. Garrett, and also she's got a new authorship going as Ashley Dyer. So she does genuinely write as three different people, but so she'll tell us all about how that came about, which of her personas is the most popular, which she would prefer to, put first. Ashley Dyer if anyone's ever read or seen the film Silence of the Lambs, of any of you? Yeah? Okay. Imagine Silence of the Lambs happened in Liverpool. That is basically the simplest premise I can give you about what Ashley Dyer is about. And it's a brilliant book. It's called Splinter in the Blood. And it's a serial killer, obviously, who leaves, as serial killers sort of almost do, leaves an impenetrable clue every time they kill someone. And I use the word impenetrable, but then we're going to say the thing is that they're leaving something sticking into people. So it's penetrable clue. It's thorns. They leave thorns embedded in the bodies. So that's why it's called Splinter in the Blood. But it's a cracking book. I mean, it races around Liverpool. You've got a female and a male police lead who there's a tension of sorts going on between them. In fact, you know, she'll tell you all this herself. The book starts with one of them being shot and assumed to be dead. And then the book just starts after that. But she's got a brand new book out under her real name, Margaret Murphy. She's with Hachette, who are quite a big publisher actually. They own Stephen King is one of their authors, so she's published by the same company as Stephen King. So she's got a brand new one out as we speak, but she's just done a week of online, you know, chatting to crime readers specifically. So we thought, no, let her have a little rest. And we're going to put a proper event page up, which I will send links to all of you, and to our other partners, Access Northwest Radio. And we've got a whole month then to tell people that Margaret's going to come and tell us about herself. Hopefully she might do a little reading, and then people can ask us some questions about writing crime books or solving murders effectively, because I think the stuff she's picked up from the forensic expert, Dr. Helen Pepper, who may be free to join us as well, it's fascinating. They normally would go around libraries and they set a crime scene up, and you come along to the talk, and the first thing is, it's not so much where do you sit, it's what's happened here. And technically you're brought in to help solve what's happened, you know, in the library. And we all come up with concoctions of what we think's happened. And Margaret and Helen stand up and go, no, it's not that, it's this. And so, you know, really looking forward to that. And before then, on the Monday before that, we've got a much more local book launch. We've got our friend Dave McCluskey from Damaged Productions, and he has basically rewritten Jack the Ripper. So we're going to have Dave back to do a little launch, effectively, for his new book, Time Ripper. So, you know, we've got some good stuff coming, but like I've said, you know, to several people, if you know anyone who's written a book, you know, get them to get in touch with myself or George, and you know, we'll have a chat and then put you in the schedule. And I do believe one of our other regulars, in fact, I think Alban, like me, has been to every one of these. You've been to every one, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I'm very much a Tony Higginson groupie.
Oh, well, isn't that nice?
And I like listening to all these real writers talk about their books. So
well, yeah, but the thing is, you're more a real reader and absorber of writing. But I do believe you would write if you had the time, wouldn't you?
I've actually written 3 books, but
now he tells
not unpublished. So, but perhaps they're unpublishable. But it's like trying to get it out of your system. So, I wrote about Charles Dickens in Liverpool.
Well, that's got a market. I can put you in touch with someone who'll look at that.
Sassoon and Formby.
Yeah.
And most recent thing I wrote was about Thomas Hardy in Puddletown,
which is where you reside now.
Yeah, I'm here representing Blackpool because that's my spiritual home because of the football and where I was born, and Puddletown, which is where I now live, in the Valley of the Piddle in the Thomas Hardy country.
I mean, if you could pick a town name to live, I think Puddletown would be up there, wouldn't it? I mean, Julie lives in Blundell Sands, which is near Crosby.
Yeah, that's a lovely name, isn't it?
Blundell Sands is nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
But not everyone's heard of that, you see. So I bet when Julie does talks and things, she'll say, and we're from Crosby near Liverpool, like, which is what I do. You know, I mean, and yeah, I'm from Waterloo, which, you know, it's his own entire place, Waterloo. But technically, people have heard of Crosby and they've heard of Liverpool, and they haven't heard of some of the other places. Karen, you're Sheffield, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, I live in Totley.
But you would probably say you're
I
from
would say
Sheffield.
Sheffield because people haven't heard of Totley.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but Puddletown sounds like it could be anywhere, and you just have pictures of like Beatrix Potter going on in your head, don't you? Really?
I'm sure I heard of Puddletown before I lived here.
Yeah.
And it sounded a bit on the dull side, doesn't it? And originally it was called Piddletown, but the Victorian ladies got upset at the use of the name. Apparently Victoria didn't like it,
Well,
so they changed it to Puddletown.
and in a past life, well, in your current life, really, you were an English teacher, weren't you? That was your main thing. Imagine being a primary teacher in Piddletown.
Yeah, it'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? Anyway, Alban was just chatting to me before we came on air, and he's doing a good job here. He's doing all the work that I'm not doing, and no one else is doing. He's looking at what's relevant that we could talk about when we come on air like this. If we haven't got a dignified guest, and you found a little piece of literary heritage that you think is worth us knowing about.
I remember saying to Tony that I'd look for things which were topical, and next Sunday is Dickens' birthday. So next Monday, if people wanted to do a Dickens reading, then that's the opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think we will put that up on the event page, Julie. Yeah, we'll do a day of Dickens next Monday, and maybe if everyone just thinks of their favourite character or adaptation made into a film, I mean, even though we're not at Christmas, there's nothing wrong with saying, Christmas Carol is your favourite and why you like it. And I think we all should, put our top hats on. Have you all got top hats to wear next Monday? Huh. No, maybe we can do it virtually.
I've actually got one.
Maybe we can do it virtually. Actually, I've got a spare one, Julie. I can, if I'm out your way delivering, I'll drop one off, and you and George can take turns. I wear it when I do my Willy Wonka show in school, actually. So I have got a spare top hat. But Alban, we're going to put you on main view because you're now going to take over for the next couple of minutes.
Okay. I was going to say something about the book I'm reading at the moment first, if I can.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, all yours.
Okay, just hearing about Julie's book and what you're reading at the moment, I thought what I'm reading at the moment is called Thomas Hardy's Women in Life and Literature by Peter Tate. I'm very keen on Thomas Hardy. I volunteer at the Cottage, and I've done some things with the Thomas Hardy, the new Hardy players and things. In fact, today I was having an audition for a small part in the Mayor of Casterbridge. They're hoping to going to do in October, but I recommend it because it tells you all about Thomas Hardy's women, including the famous Tryphena Sparks, who lived in Puddletown, and whose field, the Eweleys near Weatherbury, is very close to where I live. So I thought I'd plug a bit of Thomas Hardy. My 7-year-old grandchild thinks I'm obsessed with Thomas Hardy, and he's right. But I did say I'd look for something which is topical. I mean, yesterday was the relief of Stalingrad, so we could be talking about the enemies at the gate. But earlier on in the week, on the 26th of January, was Chinese Gordon Goes Down Fighting. And one of the things I did for the Thomas Hardy Society, they do things at Max Gate, and they had a sort of tea with Thomas Hardy. And I've been Miss Thomas Hardy, but this time I played a very William McGonagall type poet, and the poem I had to read was the one about General. I thought I might read that to you. Perhaps not the whole thing, but
go as far as you feel.
I'll keep an eye on the screen and I'll start reading it. And when I see people dropping off, or waving their fist or something, I'll stop. All right.
Okay. Thank you very kindly.
With apologies to anybody who's really Scottish, because it has to be read in a William McGonagall Scottish accent. He was this great Glaswegian who addressed the students, and they took him up and pretended he was a great orator and a great poet. And of course, they were really laughing behind his back. And when you hear his poems, you can understand why. So General of Khartoum died in 1885 went down fighting, and this is his dedication. Alas, now o'er the civilized world there hangs a gloom for brave General Gordon that was killed at Khartoum. He was a Christian hero and a soldier at the cross, and to England his death will be a very great loss. He was very cool in temper, generous and brave, the friend of the poor, the sick and the slave, and many a poor boy he did educate, and laboured hard to do so early and late. He was a man that did not care for worldly gear, because the living and true God he did fear. And the hearts of the poor he liked to cheer, and by his companions in arms he was loved most dear. He always took the Bible for his guide, and he liked little boys to walk by his side. He preferred their company more so than men, because he knew there was less guile in them. And in his conversation he was modest and plain, denouncing all pleasures he considered sinful and vain. And in battle he carried no weapon but a small cane, whilst the bullets fell around him like a shower of rain. He burnt the debtors' books that were imprisoned in Khartoum, and freed them from a dismal prison gloom. Those that were imprisoned for debt they couldn't pay, and sent them rejoicing on their way. While they engaged in the Russian war, in the midst of the fight, he stood upon a rising ground and viewed them left and right. And but for their shot and shell, he didn't care a jot. While the officers cried, "Gordon, come down, or else you'll be shot." His cane was christened by the soldiers Gordon's wand of victory, and when he waved it, the soldiers' hearts were filled with glee, while with voice and gesture he encouraged them in the strife, and he himself appeared to possess a charmed life. Want it more?
Yeah, carry on.
Okay. Once, when leading a storming party, the soldiers drew back, and he quickly observed that their courage they did lack. Then he calmly lighted a cigar and turned cheerfully found. And the soldiers rushed boldly on with a bound, and they carried the possession without delay, and the Chinese rebels soon gave way, because God was with them during the day, and with those that trust him for ever and aye. And he was always willing to conduct meetings for the poor, also meat and clothing for them he tried to procure, and he always had little humorous speeches at command, and to hear him deliver them, it must have been grand. In military life his equal couldn't he be found, no, if you were to search the wide world around. And 'tis pitiful to think he has met with such a doom by a base traitor knave while in Khartoum. Yes, the black-hearted traitor opened the gates of Khartoum, and through that the Christian hero has met his doom. For when the gates were opened, the Arabs rushed madly in, and foully murdered him, while they laughingly did grin. But he defended himself nobly with axe and sword in hand. But alas, he was soon overpowered by that savage band, and his body received 100 spear wounds and more, while his murderers exultingly did loudly shriek and roar. But heaven's will, 'tis said, must be done, and according to his own opinion, his time was come. And I hope he is now in heaven, reaping his reward, although his fate on earth was really very hard. I hope the people will his memory revere, and take an example from him, and worship God in fear, and never be too fond of worldly gear, and walk in General Gordon's footsteps while they are here.
That was brilliant, mate. Absolutely. It definitely helps to do it in the style, doesn't it? I think that's the one thing about a poet like that, that if you can get the voice that he would use, you actually get the inflection and the hidden meanings. Because you're right, he was perceived as a little bit not the world's greatest poet. The word doggerel was used by some, I believe.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of good in that. I mean, it's a great narrative. I mean, I remember Robert Browning, when I studied you know, and you know he did, you know, Pied Piper, and How They Brought the Good News from Ghent to Aix, and you know they were just the same. They were just historical reenactment with you know a rhyme. Now he stuck to his rhymes. I mean, you know he built them all properly, didn't he? But there's absolutely nothing wrong with a bit of McGonagall there, is there? Alan and Julia nodding. They've either
There's a
nodded
lot of
off or
words
they're
in there for the
agreeing.
line. That's the only thing, aren't there? Too
Anyway,
many words
the,
for the line.
the other thing we're going to do periodically, which we're still not good at, but we will get better. We do want to feature the odd, you know, local singer when we can. And there's a guy who I'm friends with. He's a lovely guy. He's from Runcorn way. He's called Gareth Heason, and he's a lovely lad. He's a big guy. He's got that real big solid voice. You know, he's a real proper crooner. But I just thought we'd just have a minute or two of having a little listen to a song of Gareth's, and then we'll come back and talk about Holocaust Memorial Day.
Village girl, a master proud. Soldier saw you through the crowd. Days flew by, love did bloom like flowers on a sunny afternoon. Billy held you, made you his one. You became Billy's girl. Sylvia, you were the one. Made her be Billy's girl. When all the years have gone, you will always be Billy's girl.
So did that play out, guys? Because I forgot to check. It did. So that's Billy's Girl by Gareth Eastham. Now, when this goes out on the radio, which is Thursday night 7 till 9, the cunning thing they do is they cut out that bit where we get it wrong, and they play the song for us. Isn't that clever? Don't you wish we could do that? Well, actually, they did give me a bit of tutorial last night, so I'm hoping next week when we are playing the music, we can get it all running a bit smoother. But I mean, obviously, we mainly want to focus on things that are nice and interesting, but I do think there are moments every year that something happens, and we do need to pay attention and reflect back on it. And every year we have Holocaust Memorial Day, which normally I know every school makes a huge effort to build it into their, you know, their lessons for the day. Even with quite young children, you know, they'll like Alban was saying, there's Primo Levi, Ellie Wiesel. Schindler's List is obviously not suitable for younger children.
The boy in the striped
Boy in the
pajamas.
Striped Pajamas, yeah. I mean, John Boyne, I've worked with John Boyne 3 times actually. When I opened my shop in Formby, 9 years ago or so, he actually was my guest author to open the shop. The publishers said to me, you know, would you like an author to come and open your shop? I said, oh, that sounds good. And they sort of said, well, who would you like? And you're thinking, well, you know, can't really ask for Lee Child or someone like that. And I suddenly thought, do you know, I love that book. It was always one of those books that you feel everyone should read, whatever age they are. And so I said, well, I really like John Boyne, and I've read quite a few of his books. And I got an email off him the next day saying, yeah, I'd love to come. So he came over. We visited a school that was doing Holocaust Memorial. And then he came to the shop, and we had an hour in the shop, and he just sat there and, you know, cut the ribbon and all that, met lots of people. And then we did an evening with him as well, so that anyone who couldn't come during daytime came. Were you there for that, Alban? I can't remember.
Don't think I was.
We're in
no.
Don Luigi's. We used the function room upstairs in Don Luigi's, which sadly has changed hands now. But we had a great time. But John, he's a lovely chap, but he's a brilliant writer. So Alban, you were mentioning, you know, I'll probably mention a couple of the names you were going to mention, but you know, just as a teacher, let alone as a reader, you know, just give us a little insight into what your perception of Holocaust Memorial is.
I think it was always an opportunity every year to remember those people who'd been killed in the Holocaust, and to bring up the issue of genocide and how it's still with us today, really, and related to our present times. So we always did take the opportunity to, and of course, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas was a godsend from an English teacher's point of view.
Yeah, and also a lot of schools do a thing where they either draw a candle lit or they encourage
Yeah.
children to light a candle in memory, don't they?
Mm.
George has made it in. Hello, George.
Hello, I'm so sorry about that. I had a call from a client that just needed to have a quick chat, so apologies for that.
It's not a problem. Not a problem. We're up and running, doing okay. We're just saying to the others and anyone who's joining us online, we've got our first proper author lined up for the 1st of March. A
Brilliant.
Liverpool-based crime author called Margaret Murphy, who writes under 3 names. So that's something interesting for people to find out about. Why have you changed your name? What made you do it?
Yeah, why 3?
We'll leave her to tell us properly. So Monday the 1st of March, we've got Margaret Murphy. We may also, if we're lucky, get joined briefly by one of her co-authors, who's a forensic expert in the police. She's still active in solving crimes. Dr. Helen Pepper. If she's free, I'm sure she'll drop in. And then we've got someone lined up for the 1st of April. A lady, Hayley Long, who's originally from Crosby, like some of us are, and she's written a couple of lovely sort of nice, easy reading, towards the holiday reads. And obviously we've got other people who are going to slot in. But we were just touching on which something you might know a little bit about or have an angle on about Holocaust Memorial Day, which was just either last Thursday or the Thursday before.
I think it was last Thursday.
Last Thursday, yeah. Although we want this sort of program to be fun and light, I think periodically you've just got to find a little moment to reflect on some of these bigger moments, haven't you? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, there's a lady. The lady I'm just going to talk about at this moment is got a connection to Southport. When my children were younger, because they're very old and grown up now, and so luckily I don't see them very often, which is brilliant. No, they're independently able to live their own lives, which has got to be a good thing. But Bethany, my oldest, went to a lovely little village school in Crossens, up at the very far end of Southport. You know where they call it the Plough Roundabout. Do you remember that? Yeah. Which is now a housing estate, isn't it? Unfortunately. Yeah. But so Bethany went to St John's in Crossens. When she was there, I think she was in year 5, a letter came home saying, now I worked in a bookshop, but this was before I knew that authors would visit a school. So this letter came home saying, on Thursday afternoon, best-selling author Liz Kessler is going to come and talk to the boys and girls in year 5 and year 6 about her new book. So we had to send some money in so Bethany could buy a book. And Liz was related to one of the teachers at the school, it turned out. And she wrote a lovely series called Emily Winsap, which was a series of books about mermaids, really popular with the girls of 10 and 11, as you can imagine. And she's done really well because her new book says on the front cover, I'm slightly holding it up here, hold on. Oh, this is me not getting the angles right again. 1 million copy best-selling author. So she's done something right, hasn't she? If she's not to such exalted levels. But no, she's a really, really lovely lady, Liz. And she's written 20 books in all, aimed at 9, 10-year-olds upwards. And this book, though, the reason we're going to tell you a little bit about this one is, this is based on her own family history. And I think sometimes we all look back at our relatives and someone will suddenly tell you that your aunt or your uncle or one of your grandparents or great-grandparents did something interesting. I mean, my granddad worked for Al Capone. So there's a story. Yeah, he was a painter and decorator in Seaforth in Liverpool, my granddad. But for some reason in the late 30s, he ventured to America. Don't know the full story. I have to get it off the parents, as it were. And apparently he worked for Al Capone for a period of time. So we wonder what that story would ever be.
Was he a made man?
No, I'm not really sure, but it's allegedly true. There is evidence to show that he I don't know if it's a photo, but no, Liz Kessler, as you can possibly tell from her name, has got a strong Jewish heritage. Her family, I think it must have been her grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. And she's eventually had the courage, because it must take some doing if you think about it, to rework that real life history and put it together in a work of fiction. And it's aimed at 12 upwards, I'd say. I would probably say if you're under 12, have a little think about whether or not you can take the depth of content. But it's the story of three friends in the 1930s, late 1930s, in Vienna, Leo, Elsa and Max. And they've been friends for years, since the day they met. There's always been the three of them in their little team. And then obviously the Nazis come. And their lives, so tightly woven, are taken on very different paths. Leo must rely on the kindness of strangers to escape the rising threat to the Jewish people. Elsa, like Leo, is hated simply for being who she is. To be safe, she must run. Max suddenly finds that he is in danger. He is the danger to his friends. They're trying to escape, and his father rises through the Nazi ranks. So it takes the story of three teenagers who are friends, and suddenly you've got this cataclysmic, future event coming. So Alban going on about The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, I think anyone who's read that, which again I'd say, although it can be read by 10 and 11, there's a lot of what goes on in Boy in the Striped Pyjamas that I think would really be a bit hard work for someone who's not a deep reader. But this is called When the World Was Ours, and obviously inspired by her own family's true story. And I'm sure that people out there, like Julie was talking about the book that she heard about on the radio, and wasn't I lucky she rang me up and ordered it off me? There's an advert we should plug. If you do want to order any books, folks, just put Beyond Books into Google, and I've got about nearly 2,000 books listed on the website now. That's why I've got these glasses on, because I can't see without them anymore. But no, there's periodically there are books that come along that you do want people to read. And Alban was just going to say something.
I was just going to mention that when we were in secondary school, we always used to read a book called Friedrich by Hans-Peter Richter, which is the story of a Jewish boy and the oncoming of the Nuremberg laws. It's a very sad book, of course, but we used to read it as a class reader in year 9, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing when you do want children to get an insight into events and history. But I think, because everyone develops at a different age. And my daughter at 9 and 10 was quite timid, whereas my son at 9 and 10 was less so. Now, he'd have read, well, he did read Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, but it wouldn't have bothered him. But our Bethany would have been in sobs, for weeks afterwards. I mean, what were yours like, Julie, with emotional reads? Can you remember much what they were like?
I think they weren't really readers for emotional books, were they, George? I don't think.
Not really,
no.
We tended to, school tended to put them on these paths of, you will read this, you will read that, you will read the other. And unfortunately, that tends to, proscribed reading is never as good as the book you pick up independently yourself.
No. Yeah.
And once all the Harry Potters came along, they all worked their way through those. And our daughter, who's 22, still reads that for pleasure, goes back and reads it all again.
Did she do Twilight, Julie? Did she do Twilight?
No, she's probably the biggest reader of them all.
Well, Mike's very musical. That's probably devours his every waking hour, doesn't it?
Yeah, he went through a phase of reading lots of sort of spy adventure type novels. I can't remember Can't remember the.
See,
type
George,
thing.
George was more.
Yeah.
You were more sci-fi and that sort of stuff when we were
Yeah.
more formative, weren't you?
Yeah, a
Fantasy
little
and
bit.
sci-fi, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Michael Moorcock, people like that was. I seem to recall was one of your huge faves back in the day.
Yeah. And then, you know, sort of going back and revisiting them, you're like, they're really not very good.
Rumours of a TV series of the Elric and Mendeley though, you know.
Have they?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
gosh.
it slightly flows off the Game of Thrones, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Karen, just quickly touching up base with you, you've got 3 children. You've got 3 as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
What were they emotional readers, or would they steer away
I
from
wouldn't
that?
say they read emotional stuff. They read mainly sort of fantasy stuff and Tolkien and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Tolkien's done quite well, hasn't he? Really, when you think about it, he's still popular now. I mean, when did he die, Alban? It was 70s, late 70s.
70, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, to still be a known name and technically probably still sells 500,000 books a year. You know, and I don't know that the films are the only reason that happens. If you think, I think it is people
the books
saying
were always
you
so
should-
much better than the films. I always
Well,
felt.
they are. I think they were with the Tolkien films. I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't that keen on them really.
No.
You know, I mean, yes, the books do take a long time to read, but
Yeah.
the films took a long time to, well, become a film. Really,
Yeah.
George is
Yeah.
agreeing. Julie's laughing in silence.
But just to,
I'm laughing because I found the films really noisy and just full of
Yeah,
epic battles that did nothing for me.
Yeah.
I liked The Hobbit as a read. I
Oh, yeah.
really struggled with the other, and I battled through it because I felt I ought to.
Well, yeah.
Didn't find it an enjoyable read, but I got to the end.
Isn't that strange how something that's so monumental, I mean, each book's about 500 pages, probably more, really.
I always put it down as Tolkien's one of the things which turned me on to literature.
Yeah.
And I read The Hobbit, and then I read all the Lord of the Rings books, and I must have read them about 3 or 4
My
times.
dad's the same. My dad would reread.
There's nothing like taste, is there?
No, my dad would reread them. I'd say, Dad, this is good. No, I'm rereading Lord of the Rings. And that would be him for 3 months. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that as well.
But he did eventually start reading. David Eddings was a fantasy author I was a big fan of. And if you've got a kid of about 11, 12 who does want high quality fantasy adventure, they've got all the action in of the equivalent of Lord of the Rings without any of the overdone violence. You know, but they were really good. And they all had a chess theme. So the first one was called Pawn of Prophecy. And there was Magician's Gambit, and you know, so it went through stages of a chess game with things happening. So they were called the Belgariad, and then there was a couple of spin-offs to them. But David Eddings, if you want something towards Tolkien but not as heavy going, I would definitely give that a recommendation. Alban, you were
things like-
going to recommend
I was
something.
just going to say like the Weird Stone of Brisingham, and
Alan Garney's still alive?
Dated now, but it's still a great read. And I was just going to plug the idea of class readers. I know we all want them to read independently, and paperbacks for me were always the way forward. But to choose a good class reader, like something like Friedrich, would give them a chance to discuss very difficult issues in a very safe environment. So I think there's a place for it. I mean, perhaps I've not been teaching now for 8 years, so perhaps the world's moved on. But for me, a good class reader is something you couldn't really do without.
Oh no, I agree entirely. I think it's a great way of bringing children together to try and hopefully enjoy, you know, literature. In fact, it's funny you mentioned teaching, because I know quite a few other teachers. At the moment, they're all a bit frazzled, I'm afraid. Imagine, aren't we all? But I think one week it might be nice to get a couple of teachers on, and maybe we look at how books are used in school. Because I think it would be quite interesting for people to hear from the people that have to spend time with the children every day, going over Shakespeare or going over, Hardy or Dickens or whatever. I think some books stayed on the syllabus a long time, and it sort of feels it would be nice that every year there was a minimum of one new book just to freshen it up for the teachers, let alone the children really.
Again, it's one of my hobby horses that when I stopped teaching, they stopped using the American novels like Of Mice and Men and To Kill a Mockingbird,
Yeah.
and they were used not because the stock covers were full of them, but because they were tried and tested. And I always say, if you only ever, I mean, again, it's personal preference. If you only ever read one book in your life, it has to be To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh yeah, I would certainly put that in my top 10. Yeah.
If that's too long, then Of Mice and Men. But the reason those two were on the syllabus is because they were so successful. And I've not forgiven some we won't be political, but there's a certain politician who I won't forgive who took the American
MG.
books off the syllabus.
MG.
That's a polite name for him, yes.
Yeah, yeah. It could be called many things if it's who I'm thinking of. We were hoping to have had another friend of mine pop in tonight who was desperately quite keen to come and chat to us, but he hasn't yet made it. But I did promise him we would play his new single. So just give me a second and we'll go back to our thing, and we will just play a minute of this. Now, he's a lovely chap. He's called Brian Gibson, and he's a brilliant artist, Brian. He's one of those people who can turn his hand to pretty much any type of art. He can do his own stuff, or he can do in the style of other people. You know, he's just mega talented. He was best friends with Carla Lane, actually. So he's been involved in acting, and I knew he loved music, but I didn't know he could sing. And he's got a new CD out called The Crafty Nutkin, and we'll get him on another week to tell us a bit more about it personally. But I did promise him would play a bit on the show now, and then Thursday night 7 till 9 when the show is edited for the radio, they can play the whole song. So have a listen to this, folks, and see who do you think this sounds like.
Night and day, you are the one. Only you need the moon and under the sun. Whether near to me or far, it's no matter, darling, where you are. I think near. Day and night and day. Why is it so?
So that was rather nice, wasn't it? Bit Frank Sinatra, I think. What would you say, George?
I think, yeah, definitely Sinatra. I was just thinking, there's a singer that was with Swing Shift, who Julie will know who Swing Shift are, who does that sort of thing. What was his name? Just wondering if it's the same bloke.
Well, Brian's. You've got to be very careful how you try and age people without meaning to give their age away. He's probably in his 60s, Brian.
Right.
He's certainly a bit older than me.
Okay.
I used to
Not
know.
him, then.
When I used to do my little guest slot on Radio Merseyside on a Thursday night, they'd always have a little panel of us, a bit like we are tonight, really.
Yeah.
And they'd like to vary it, so they'd have me going on about a couple of books for 20 minutes. They'd have a local singer. They had a chef on some weeks, and that was great because he'd bring in stuff he'd cooked, and we'd all get to try it live on air. Yeah. Well, when we're in the studio, Julie, when Access Northwest allow us access to the real studio, which will happen when we're allowed, it's going to be up. We're hoping a school in West Derby have got an annex that's going to be rented or used. And, I would like to think by April or May, we can all take turns at coming up and spending an hour, in the real, proper radio studio. And then we can have guests in with, live food tasting on air. But no, there was a guy who worked on the Wirral who ran a cafe. I can't remember his name, top of my head. But he used to turn up on a Friday night and occasionally I was lucky and got roped in on a Friday if someone was ill or on holiday. And some of the cakes and things he brought in were just divine. And they had a medical chap. They had a doctor on as well, who so listeners would ring in. They had a proper phone in, and he'd go over their illnesses live on air. Yeah. So I don't know if we're up for
Almost
that.
like Frasier, was it?
A bit like Frasier, yeah, a bit like Frasier. But I think it's nice to just have a little bit of other things as well as concentrating on the books and the reading. I mean, Alban, other than Thomas Hardy, who you read every day, it's your religion. Have you had time to read anything else recently you could quickly air out and say to people it's good?
I've actually been sort of revisiting Jane Austen and King Arthur and his knights, to be honest, because I'm doing 2 talks on those for on another platform. So I've been revisiting and doing some research. What I've been watching on television, I know it's not reading, but I've been binging on Poldark, which I'd never watched all the way through before. And there are 4 series of 4 series of it, and I'm on the 4th series at the moment, and maybe more that I don't know. But I'm doing a Poldark holiday, COVID willing, in July, so I'm doing my homework for that. And they're very, very watchable. So I must pick up the Winston Grahams and read them as well.
Poldark was one of my mum's favourites when the original series was on telly.
Yeah.
I do think that the current version has lifted it to a whole new audience, Julie and Karen. Did you watch any of it? Julie?
Didn't see any of it at all.
No? I would
Just
have thought
didn't
you'd
do
have
it
liked
for
that.
me.
Really? And Karen?
Not my sort of thing, I don't think.
Yeah.
And
Surely.
we have a tendency to pick something and wait until it's all been done and then binge watch it. And at the time when they were talking about the sound quality and that you couldn't hear the words, and my hearing's not great anyway, and the thought that I would have to be glued to the subtitles all the way through put me off it a bit. Might come to it later on at some point, but yeah, it's not something that we've dabbled in yet. But I think the scenery is beautiful, and I believe that the male scenery and the scything seems to excite a lot of young people.
That's what I thought you and Karen might remember from the telly. Yeah, was it Ross Poldark, Karen?
Yeah, he was doing 5 and
Aidan
6. I
Turner.
remember them very well.
Yeah, he seemed to be very popular in the posts on social media I saw anyway. Now I went down to Cornwall in this summer, Alban, and it's a phenomenal place to go, see and explore. I was only there for a couple of days, so I didn't get to do Poldark or Daphne du Maurier, but I did do quite a few other bits there. But I'm hoping, like you say, if we're allowed to go, I'd certainly be going down for the week this year and do the Lost Gardens of Heligan and Daphne du Maurier, a bit of Poldark.
Last year, I know I'm obsessive, but last year I went with the Hardy Society, and we did the walk around Boscastle that Hardy would have taken with Emma, his first wife, when they first met. So we went following it on his footsteps along the cliff top there. But that's, of course, North Cornwall rather than Poldark Cornwall.
Well, there's plenty of tin mines on the north coast as well, because I had a friend who got me the keys for a relative's disused tin miner's cottage, and that was on the north coast. So I got 2 nights staying in this old ransacked old Cornish tin cottage, and then went down to the south coast, to explore. Yeah. So it was fun. George, I know you've got work all the time, but have you managed to dabble through a book in the last week or 3?
Not in the last week or 3, I'm afraid. No, not at all. We've just been, trying to catch up with things, really. Just not had time. We've done a lot of binging on Netflix, I'm afraid, with what is it we're watching at the moment, Julie? Designated Survivor?
Oh,
That's
don't
the
know
one.
that one. What's that about, without spoiling it for those of us that haven't watched it then?
It is about what they call the designated survivor. So when they have a big thing with all the government going to Capitol Hill, they will have one person from each party as designated survivors who will not go to that, so that should anything catastrophic happen, they've at least got one person from each party who could step in as president and vice president or whatever. And it is just, from the first 5 minutes in, it's like, oh my God. And you're caught. And it is, I mean, the poor bloke is just having a torrid time as president of the United States. And you're just like, really? That as well? But it is just captivating. We binged series 1 and we're now on series 2. There's 4 series. I think it's 60 hours or 80 hours of it that we'll never get back, but it is just next episode. So it's a bit like a Lee Child novel.
Well, I think that's the thing at the moment, though, because our lives have ground to a halt for most of us. And if you're lucky enough to have someone else living with you in the house, like a partner, a husband, wife, whatever, you can watch something together. And much as reading is wonderful, unless you've both got the patience to be reading the same book at the same time, it's not something you do together, is it? I mean, also, I mean, you like Lee Child, I like Lee Child. I've never asked Julie, does Julie like Lee Child or not?
I do like Lee Child, and that's when we try and buy one book between us. The first one to start nodding, the other one snatches the book out of their hands and carries on.
Yeah, we had to do that. Yeah.
And it was a bit like that with the Harry Potters, when those came out. The last book, we called it Harry Potter and the Lost Weekend, because whoever got the book first just disappeared off into a hammock and just didn't emerge until it was all over. Yeah. But sharing a book.
It was also known as Harry Potter and the Deadly Silence. Yeah. Because the entire country went quiet that weekend. Oh yeah, it was a
wonderful experience, wasn't it? I mean, we did midnight openings. I mean, Alban probably came to one of them when we had Pritchard's in Formby.
Yeah. I think I told you the story of how you recommended the Philosopher's Stone before it was well known.
I know.
And I did that as a literary summer school, and it went down a real bomb.
And don't you wish you'd kept that copy? It'd be worth 30,000.
I wish I had. Yeah, I could retire on that.
We had first. We, like most bookshops, the rep comes and shows you the new books, and you look at them, and go, yeah, that looks good. Oh, that looks good. So you'd say, all right, well, we'll have 2 of that one or 3 of that one, whatever. And obviously, a new children's book in hardback is not normally guaranteed to sell anyway. But if you're going to read it yourself, the secret, trade secret here, you take it home and read it really carefully, and then you could take it back to the shop and pretend no one had touched it. Don't tell anyone that. Never did it myself. But no, because the reps would give you free books to read, and you could ask specifically if you were going to really make a big effort. Like Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, I mean, lots of booksellers will have read that and raved about it. But no, Harry Potter, we did midnight collect your book experience.
I remember, yes.
And they were great fun. But one of them, and why the penny never dropped, I don't know, but we're all there, all dressed in our wizard robes and all that. And we had Bruff's the Butchers did a midnight barbecue. They did a barbecue outside. You probably went to the one in Pritchard's in Crosby, George, I would think.
No, we didn't go to any of those.
No, you're not getting to it now. No. So we're all there, having an absolutely great time. The atmosphere was amazing. We probably had 100 people in the streets outside the shop. And then at 5 to midnight, me and one of the staff could go in the shop and turn the till on and put the lights on, and everyone could start filing in, and they'd come up to the counter, get their book. And we're doing this, and it was going really well because we knew we had everyone's name and everyone was collecting whether they wanted the children's cover or the adult cover, all going really well. Looked out of the corner of my eye to the right where the door was, and there were 2 policemen, big policemen, and I was stood there thinking, oh no, they're going to tell us to close because we haven't told them. Can we have permission to be open out of hours? Because technically our trading hours were Monday to Saturday, 9 till 5:30. What you doing open at midnight on a Friday night? I think.
They would have been lynched.
Well, yeah, well, there was that, Alvin, yeah, that was. But my little brain was panicking at this moment in time. And anyway, so after about a couple of minutes, one of them sauntered over to the counter and said, "Excuse me." And I thought, "Oh, what's going on?" He says, "Who's in charge?" So I said, "Well, I'm the manager." He says, "What on earth is going on here?" We said, "Well, a lot of people have come to collect their Harry Potter book." I said, we've taken lots of orders and people are keen to start reading it as quick as they can." And he went, "Oh," he says, "you haven't got any spare." He says, I can buy two. Have you got two? I want one for my son, one for my daughter. He says, "And I'll go home in an hour and they'll be stone dead asleep. I can sneak into their room and put one on each pillow. And then when they get up in the morning, that's all they'll be doing. And I'll actually get a lie in for once." But it was a lovely thing to happen, because we didn't have many spare. You tend, with an event like that, you've got your list with 98 names on it. So you might only have ordered 100. You might only have a couple spare. Did you do stuff like that over in sunny Yorkshire, Karen?
Yes, there were queues at Waterstones and stuff like that.
And did you go for a midnight one? Did you do it?
No, I didn't.
No.
Wasn't a very good parent, was I?
No, obviously not. If it's as much the adults as the kids, I think when because the one thing about the Harry Potter books at the time was no one was allowed to touch it before you sign this strict embargo saying thou must not open the box even until the stroke of midnight. It was pretty strict, actually.
Like an exam paper.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, very much so. So no one really knew what and it was almost like who was going to be the quickest to read it, wasn't it? And obviously being dim, I only took one copy home for like me and the wife and 2 kids. So we only had one copy between 4 of us. So it was a nightmare, as everyone was on a different chapter at the same time, weren't they? And actually, to be fair, Matthew was a bit younger then. So I think what happened at bedtime is me and the wife would take turns at reading him a chapter. Then we'd give the book to Bethany, who would read under her own volition. And then when we went to bed, like you two were saying, who's going to stay awake the longest? I'm having 3 chapters, you can read some other rubbish. But we don't get that much that's that exciting like that, do we really? I mean, I'm going to speak controversially here, but do you think it happened with 50 Shades of Grey? Karen, did you read it? What was your...
Yeah, I did read. I read some of it, but it wasn't very well written.
No.
But it was well marketed.
Don't forget, we are live on the internet.
Yeah, so good luck.
That's okay. Yeah, but I mean, would you be rushing to say to your partner, "Oh, you've got to read this, you've got to read this"? Can we actually think of another book that you would think that's happened with, George? Any
Definitely, yeah. And it was when a friend of ours, Julie, lent Julie Cunningham a book, and it was The Hard Way by Lee Child.
Yeah.
And Julie we were there on holiday. She took to the tent, and anytime she came out of the tent, she had the book in her hand, and would be eating food with the book in her hand, and then eventually she'd got through it. And I said, "Was it a good book then?" She said, "Yeah, you might like it." And then that was it with me for the next day and a half. And my book. So yeah, it's one of those books. It got us onto Lee Child.
Yeah.
It was one of those ones that you just couldn't put down.
Oh no, he is. He was very reliable. I think I've read. There's about 25 of them, aren't there? I think.
Yeah, 25, 26.
I think I've read 21 of them. I think I'm behind. I don't think I've read the last 2 or 3, but I would normally do, and purely out of pleasure, because as a bookseller, you don't longer have to read the new Lee Child to tell people it's any good.
Yes.
But going quickly back to Harry Potter before we move to anything any other matters. Bloomsbury, the rep for Bloomsbury was a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. He wasn't just the rep; he was actually a personal friend. Mm-hmm. And we were due to go on holiday not long after one of the books came out, and he turned up in the shop. He turned up in the shop one day with this carrier and said, "Here, when you go on holiday, there's a T-shirt for each of the kids. They were the official T-shirts from the launch at the British Library in London,
Wow.
and they were in gold embossed. They were lovely T-shirts. So we're at the airport going off to sunny Spain or whatever, and you could see all these kids in the queue staring at our kids, going, "Look, where did they get that T-shirt? I want that T-shirt, mum. Mum, where did you get that T-shirt?" I think Bethany, being Bethany, has probably still got hers, and it probably still fits her. Yeah. No, Karen. Yes, you must tell us.
Oh,
Lord of the Rings and Lee Child. Have you got a hot pick for us?
well, it's not a hot pick. It's just what I'm reading at the moment. Is research for my book, and it's called Fred's War, and it's about a doctor in the trenches in the First World War. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And who's it by, just in case anyone...
By Andrew Davidson.
Okay. And so it's a true story from a doctor's perspective.
Yeah, it's from a doctor's perspective.
Quite hard reading, I would think, is it? It's got to sounds like it's going to be a bit grim mostly, or...
It's not too grim, no. It's quite informative, because what the hero in my book is a doctor in the trenches in the First World War. So,
My grandfather was in the RAMC, was a sergeant in the RAMC in the First World War.
oh, right, wow.
So that would be of interest to me as well. So I'll read that book and your book when it comes out.
You might have a long wait for my book.
Now, the other thing I'm hoping will be happening in the warmer months, like April, May onwards, is that we will hopefully not just be allowed near the actual radio station itself, but we might be allowed to go to places like libraries and church halls, and actually invite, an author to come and read to us, talk to us, and, we can actually then buy their book off them. It was something I'd been doing, did it obviously when I had the bookshop myself, but I got friendly with the librarians in Bolton Central Library, because there's no bookshop in Bolton, sadly. And one of the librarians there and I, we got friends through, we both were fans of a brilliant book called The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry.
Oh, yeah.
I think Jim Broadbent might be in the film. They're definitely making a film or a TV series. It's lovely, really, really quality, proper story. So I was a fan of this book, and I saw that the author was doing a talk in Bolton at the library for her new book. And I said to Vicky, the girl who worked with me, I said, "Hey, Vicky, we can't ask her to come back to the shop. It's too soon. She was here last year. They won't say yes, even though we sold lots of books. But I'm going to ring the rep up and see if I can go to Bolton and wait till the end of their talk and get some books signed. So put a note up saying signed copies coming, that sort of thing." So I troll over to Bolton with this cardboard box full of books. And I had a T-shirt printed with Harold Fry came to Formby. So I'm there in the audience in Bolton while this lady, Rachel Joyce, is doing her talk. And she stares up and smiles and waves at me, and everyone's thinking, why is she waving at that bloke in the audience? And then they saw the T-shirt and thought, oh, he's obviously a friend or family or whatever. And we got to the end of it all, and I had to wait till the end, and she gave me a big hug, signed all these books, we had a nice catch-up. And this lady said, "Well, who are you? Why have you come all the way to Bolton?" I said, "Well, I run a bookshop in Formby, and Rachel came last year, and we sold nearly 100. We had a great time." I said, "But we knew you were doing an event this time," and she said, "Oh, well, would you have come all the way to Bolton to sell books then?" I said, "Yeah, of course I would." So I got this gig selling books for all the authors to do talks in Bolton. So you know the Atkinson in Southport. It's similar to that. It's a proper big library with a lecture hall, and we had Kate Atkinson, Tess Gerritsen, we had loads of famous authors. But one of the ones we had not long before we were kicked out, no longer allowed in, not for anything we did, COVID, no one's allowed in, are they? Was a chap from Bolton called Matt Cain. Now, you won't have heard of him yet, but when this book comes out, you will. His first book was called The Madonna of Bolton. And when he was a lad of about 12, he was a huge Madonna fan, okay? Loved Madonna. Infatuation levels. Bought every version of every single and cassette, posters, begged the posters off the record shop. He had everything Madonna. And then obviously she was getting more and more famous, and his ambition was not just see her live, but to meet her. And the whole book's his life, getting older and older, and still desperate to meet Madonna. And brilliant book, very funny, very funny. And he's a huge ambassador for LGBT rights, you know, Manchester Pride, that sort of stuff. Well, his new book comes out on the 27th of May, so we're way ahead of reality here. But this is the joy of my job. I've got a copy of a book that comes out on the 27th of May. That's 6 months away, isn't it? And it's going to be huge, this book. So we're hoping that come May, we can invite you and other people to either come to Bolton and meet him in the library, you know, in the lecture hall, or, you know, we'll run a thing where people can order a copy and I'll get them signed. But it's called The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle. Albert Entwistle was a postman. It was one of the few things everyone knew about him, and it was one of the few things he was comfortable with people knowing. So it's the hidden life of this 64-year-old postman in a quiet northern village, and I promise you this book's going to be one of the books of, you know, the early summer. So Lorraine Kelly likes it immensely. Had to read it in one sitting, loved it. Really heartwarming, joyful but poignant. So, you know, it's a long way off. But
Give us the title again, Tony.
It's called The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle, and it's published by Headline. And Matt Cain, he's a lovely, lovely chap. I mean, he's just one of those happy, lovely people that you meet every so often. But he's definitely doing a big event, either online or in person, for us in Bolton. And I'm sure we can nab him and get him on for one of our book chats, you know, nearer the time. You know, so, you know, it's nice to have something to look forward to at the moment. I mean, Karen's looking forward to February next year when her book comes out. And Julie's looking forward to when and what are you looking forward to, Julie?
Well, before we get on to that, I was just going to say, you mentioned the Atkinson and then talked about Bolton. Is there no possibility of getting any kind of book launch at the library in Atkinson?
Oh yes, no, we were in conversation with them about that very thing. We were scheduled, this was what was so upsetting for me. March last year, I had a big event booked with the Atkinson for mid to late April with Anne Cleves, who writes Vera and Shetland. Mm-hmm. She is best friends with Margaret Murphy, who's going to be our guest in a month's time. And she's originally, she used to live on the Wirral, Anne. Her and her husband were the curators of Hilby Island. You know, he was a huge naturalist, bird watcher, you know, that sort of stuff. And he was the warden on Hilby Island. So they lived there for a few years. And Anne, it was Anne's 20th anniversary as an author. And we had an event booked at the Atkinson, and we were going to do another one like later in the year. And, you know, we were going to do 2 or 3 with her and other crime writers, you know, together. And we also had the Poet Laureate, Simon Armitage, booked as well, which will still go ahead. I've spoken to Sefton.
He's a great speaker, Simon Armitage.
Oh yeah, no, he's from your neck of the woods, Karen, actually, isn't he? Isn't he Leeds way? He's from that area, isn't he?
I don't know, actually.
Near Huddersfield.
Huddersfield.
Marston, is it, or Marsden? Marston?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but no. So Simon Armitage is scheduled when life goes back to normal. He genuinely wanted to visit as many libraries as he could as Poet Laureate, which is a brilliant thing to do. You know, and live poetry is something that, you know, I think people need to realise, if you go and sit there and watch and listen to proper live poetry, you're in for a huge treat. I mean, there are some sensational poets locally, let alone nationally, and you know, big published ones. I mean, Brian Bilston. Any of you follow Brian Bilston on Twitter and the like? Alban, have you seen any of his?
No, I don't.
I'll share some for you later. But he's really, really good. It's like Stephen Fry. He's got that type of wit and charm about him. But he's brilliant. You know, and obviously Roger McGough, you know, one of our finest Liverpool poets, and Brian Patton. I did an event with Brian Patton at Bolton Library, and I did one with Roger McGough at the Everyman, about 6, 7 years ago. John Hegley, he's very funny. I don't know if any of you have come across John Hegley. We're going to have to do more poetry, Alban, aren't we?
You will.
I think we'll have to do a couple of poems, you know, once a month, and introduce people to something new and poetic.
If anyone's interested, the Dead Good Poets Society obviously aren't running on their normal Wednesdays anymore, but they do have an online thing on Facebook, which if you find the Dead Good Poets Society on Facebook, I think there's a Zoom link, and I think it's this week. It's the first Wednesday of the month. And if anybody wants a good laugh,
oh yeah,
for a long time I was a regular there.
Yeah.
And it is just you never know what you're going to get.
Oh no, there's some people.
Some of the most brilliantly clever poets.
Yeah.
It was just a joyful evening whenever you went.
Yeah.
But I haven't been to any of the online ones, but just Wednesday evenings, it's on Facebook. You can find it.
So this is it. We're doing community service here as well as enjoying ourselves, aren't we? Really. Anyway, guys, I think we probably should wind ourselves down for this week. You know, because you know, I know we're all doing it on top of our other things in life and our day jobs and, you know, writing and whatever. But you know, hopefully we'll get a few more people on board for next week. See if we can find someone to do a little guest spot on Dickens as well as Alban, you know, chivying us along. But if you've got time to look back at Dickens, just have a think about what have you liked about Dickens. You know, if you can find a little reading, maybe, you know, be brave and do a little reading. And if I can get us a guest poet or a guest local singer for a 10-minute slot, we'll see if we can line someone up as a little special guest. So,
Sounds good.
Any last words to throw out to the ether, George?
Only, I suppose, you were asking about books that you know you could race through, and a couple of books came to mind, which was Ranulph Fiennes' The Feathermen.
Oh yeah, the SAS.
That was very, very good.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the SAS. It was about a shadowy organisation in the background called the Feathermen. That was really good. And anybody of my sort of age or our age will probably remember a lot of the incidents that happened within that book. And there's a number of things that you kind of go, oh, I remember that. So that's well worth a read, I would say. He was in the
SAS, wasn't he?
He was in the SAS, yeah.
Yeah, because last year he did a big potted history of the SAS, didn't he?
Yes,
yeah. You remember, yeah.
Yeah.
He did one about badgers, didn't he? He did. Was he a big like Brian May from Queen, a big Save the Badger type campaigner?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
He did a book called The Set about you know what goes on with badgers. Mm-hmm. You know, but that you know, yes, no, you're right. I do remember that book. And the other one at that time was The Spycatcher. Do you remember that?
I didn't.
No one was allowed to read for ages because it had a real Secret Service stamp of you can't read it, and we had to import it. We actually had to import it from America or somewhere for people to read in England. It was about an English spy as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember that.
You do, don't you? You probably all did it. I know people did. There was that, and anyone remember the Satanic Verses? I read them.
Yeah. Salman Rushdie.
Yeah. Julie, do you remember that?
I do remember that, but I haven't read it.
It's a bit Lord of the Rings territory. It's one of those books you've got to be patient and really, really stick with it. But again, it's worth it if you can make the effort. You know, but it's not an easy read, but it's phenomenally interesting. But, you know, we had to hide that book under the counter. We weren't allowed to put it on display. And the girl who worked for me at the time, Tracy, was lovely. And she had a friend who she knew from London, and he used to ring up and chat to her at lunchtime when I was having my coffee in the back. Anyway, he rang up one day when she'd gone out for lunch, and I answered the phone. I said, Pritchard, can I help you? And this London voice says, are you the manager? I said, yeah, I'm Tony, I'm the manager. He says, and he made some name up, I can't remember what it was now. He says, and I work for Secker and Warburg, and what we're thinking is we'd like Salman Rushdie to come and visit small local bookshops. Oh, don't tell anyone though, but you know, just have a few copies, and he'll come in, and when no one's around, and he'll sign them for you. Maybe just tell 2 or 3 of your really regular loyal customers. Anyway, being naive and dim, I fell for this hook, line and sinker. So Tracy comes back from lunch and she saw I was in a good mood and says, "You all right?" I said, yeah, I'm really good, really good. I said, "You won't believe it." I said, "We just had a phone call off this fella called Barry something or other from Secker and Warburg, and next Monday he's going to bring an author in." She went, "Oh, who is it? Who is it?" I said, "Salman Rushdie." She went, I'll kill him. And she knew it was her friend. And I'd fallen for it. Oh, I was totally gone. Just, you know, totally gone. It was funny, but you know, I was all set to, you know, slip notes to customers saying, "Do you want to sign Salman Rushdie?" And they wouldn't have got one. Anyway, listen, guys, we will knock things off now because thank you as ever for coming and joining in. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Tony.
No problem. Thank you very much.
George and Julie, Karen.
Good night,
Good to see
all.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night,
We'll
all.
see you
See you soon
soon.
next week. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.